Hi, welcome. My name is Jesse Diaz, and I work for IPI. I'm a partner at IPI, and we've created a walkthrough of the tax organizer we've created for the 2020 tax year. This specifically addresses the tax return 1120S, and it was created based on the 1120S tax return in order to help to classify your income and expenses based on the IRS requirements to avoid any penalties or any interest due to late filing. We have split up this tax organizer into four tabs. The first one is a basic checklist that lists all the documents that are required before we start your tax return. The second tab is for clients that are claiming vehicle expenses. The IRS requires additional vehicle information for each vehicle the corporation is using. And we have our third tab here that lists all the income and expenses that are generated and dispersed by the corporation. The fourth tab here is several examples of the forms that are required on that first checklist. You have here your form, or what the form is called, along with the title and an IRS link so you can see a sample of this. But we'll be showing some samples of some of these documents that are required. So let's start off with the first checklist. Please remember that your tax return deadline for this year is March 15, 2021. This first tab is some general information and basically a checklist of all the documents that are required to complete your tax return. We'll start off with the company name, tax year, contact, and contact email. These are important as we receive hundreds and hundreds of emails during our tax year and hundreds of tax organizers. So we want to make sure that we identify the correct corporation for the tax organizer we're receiving. If you're a new client, there are certain forms that are required that were made during your corporation establishment. The first one is the Form 2553. It is a total of 4 pages. Even though it says 3 here, it is 4 pages. And that's one of the forms we require. And an example of that is right here. And it's basically a form that elects you to be recognized as an 1120S. That is an important election as it will allow you to carry over your activity for your corporation to your personal tax return to offset any gains you could have in your personal tax return. If you don't have this, you're recognized as an 1120 corporation, and it will not allow you to flow through that business activity into your personal tax return, and you won't be able to take any advantage of offsetting expenses in your corporation on your personal tax return. So this is a pretty important form to make sure you have. This form here lists basically general information of the corporation, including the name, the state of incorporation, and the date the corporation started. And as I mentioned before, it is 4-page document. And in this 4 pages, the first and the second page are the most important. The second page here lists all your shareholder information. The IRS requires the shareholder information, including the name and address of the shareholder, the number of shares they own, and a valid Social Security number. In the past, we've sometimes received the names of the shareholders, but we've received the Social Security numbers listed as 000. We cannot file that tax return without a valid Social Security, so make sure those are completely filled out when you send that over to us. Again, this form was generated when you first, whomever created the corporation for you, first established the corporation. So if you don't have that, please reach out to that company or that person that did that for you and get a copy of it. If they don't have a copy or you can't get in contact with them, please contact the IRS immediately to get a copy of that form, as they probably have it. Now, back to our checklist. One of the other forms that are required when we do your tax return is the Articles of Incorporation. The Articles of Incorporation basically are your bylaws for your corporation. It lists things like shareholder amounts, and here's a sample of it here for each shareholder. And it also lists, at times when you file it with the state, it lists the state ID number, which is required on the state tax return. It's usually on the top right hand side here of this Articles of Incorporation. So please make sure to provide that for us as well. Again, that is probably something that whomever established your corporation has. So please make sure to reach out to that individual, that company, to get that information for you. The next one is a statement of information, and that's what they call the form for the state of California. For other states, it could be called different, but it is something that has to be filed with the state when you created your corporation. This again will probably be something that was given to you from the company that created your corporation. So if you don't have that, please make sure to reach out to that company or that individual to get that information. A sample of that here will appear on your screen shortly, and that is basically the same information that's on your Form 2553, but it's specifically for the state. So there is some information there that's unique to the state. So we need to make sure we have a completed one of these forms for your state. The main thing that'll have is your state ID. That state ID is required for all state tax returns to be filed. So please make sure to get that as well. Once you file that Form 2553 we looked at before, the IRS will send you a letter acknowledging your status as an 1120S. And that letter is really important, as we can't start filing without that letter. And a sample of that letter will appear on your screen now, and it will list your corporation name, your ID number, but the main thing you want to have is this thing in the middle that says you will be treated as an S Corp starting, and it'll say a date. If you filed the Form 2553 correctly, you will have this letter, and it will have a date that corresponds to the date you created your organization, which will be a day in a month in 2020. If you don't have this yet, please reach out to the IRS immediately to get a copy of this. They will have it as long as you have filed your Form 2553 completely and in time. Reach out to the IRS. We've had several clients that didn't have it, and it just took a call to the IRS, and they got a pretty quick response and got a copy of that for us right away. If you have rental property, the IRS requires you to have all income and expenses for that rental property separate. So a tax organizer will need to be created for each rental property you have. One of the forms that are required from the IRS is a Form 1098. That form is obtained or is given to you from your mortgager of that rental property. A sample of that form is now on your screen, and it just shows some basic information like the address of the rental property, the mortgage interest that you received, that the mortgager received from you, and all this information is required on your tax return. So it's imperative that we get that. If you don't have that yet, reach out to your mortgager and get that right away. The next section on the checklist deals with not only new, but now repeating clients. For repeating clients, all these documents we just went through, they've already supplied that for us, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. But you will have to complete the tab number 2, which is the vehicle information tab if you are claiming vehicle expenses. And of course, you will have to complete tab number 3, which is the income statement tab. This again lists all your income and statement for the corporations. Now, keep in mind, even though you're a repeating client, and you probably, if you have rental property, you probably gave us Form 1098 in the prior year, but that form is renewed every year. It's different information for each year, and it's required for each year. So if you have rental property and you're a repeating client, you still have to provide the 2020 version of that Form 1098. So now we'll go through each of these tabs in more detail, and we'll start with tab number 2. Tab number 2 is all the vehicle information for any vehicles you're using for the corporation. If you're not claiming vehicle expenses, you don't have to complete this tab. But if you are, the IRS requires additional information for each vehicle that is being used by the corporation. We have split this tab into 2 sections. One's for new clients, which is here on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side for returning clients. If you're a new client and you're using vehicles for your corporation, the information that's required by the IRS is listed here under the vehicle number 1. Some of that information includes total miles that you used the vehicle for the year, and those total miles, out of that total miles, how much was personal and how much was business. It also asks for the make and model, the year of your vehicle, and if you purchased the vehicle, what was the purchase date and what was the purchase amount. If you leased the vehicle, it asks the lease date, the lease monthly amount, and the lease annual amount. And you would fill all that information here in this yellow section. If you have a second vehicle, there's been space here where you can complete that same information for the second vehicle. And for the new clients, that's pretty much all you have to do. Now, for returning clients, if you had a vehicle in your prior year and you're using the same vehicle again, the information that's required is a little less. The information that the IRS requires for returning clients that are using the same vehicle that they did in the prior year all relates to miles. It's the total miles for the year, the total personal miles, and the total business miles for the year. And again, you would complete that here in the yellow section. If you have a second vehicle, we provided space for that second vehicle to provide that same information. Returning clients sometimes will sell their vehicle and potentially purchase a new vehicle to replace it. If that's the case, we have provided a section for sold vehicles. If you were to sell a vehicle, some of the information you provided for your old vehicles will be required for the sold vehicles. That includes the miles that you used that vehicle for that year. Out of those total miles, how much was personal and how much was business. It also asks for the make and model, the year of the vehicle, and the date that you sold the vehicle. And again, you would complete all that information in this yellow section. If you had a second vehicle you sold, we provided space to fill that information for the second vehicle. Now, if you sold the vehicle and you replaced it with a new vehicle, we've provided a section to provide that information for each of the new vehicles you purchased. That information that's required is the total miles for the year, the total business miles, and the total personal miles, along with the make, model, the year of the vehicle, and if you purchased the vehicle, what was the purchase date and the purchase amount. If you leased it, what was the lease date and what was the lease monthly amount and the annual amount. If you purchased a second vehicle, we've provided space here for that information. And now we'll go through tab number 3, which is the income statement. For tab number 3, this tab reflects the income and the expenses of the corporation. We'll start with an overall view of the spreadsheet and how it's set up. This spreadsheet is split into two sections, the income section and the expense section. In each of the income and expense section, we have broken out into months, 12 months for the year from January to December. The O column totals January to December to give you a total. We've provided this for you for your use if you want to go ahead and enter in each month here to make sure you've included every single month for that category. It is not necessary for you to use this if you already have a total. The IRS only cares for your annual amount, and we've only provided this month by month section here for your purposes. But you don't have to use it. As long as you have the total here, you can just go ahead and enter it in the column O and be done with it. In column P, we've pointed out a couple of IRS requirements. In the past, these have been really tricky, and there's been a lot of questions on these, so we went ahead and provided this section, or we added this column in here for some information on those categories. So please make sure to take a look at that. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Columns Q and R are provided for our purposes to categorize these income and expenses to the same categories that are required by the tax return. So you don't have to worry about Q and R. That's just for our purposes. Now let's go through some of the detail here on some of these items as they become a little bit tricky, or we've had several questions in the past about these items. We'll start off with the income section. The income section here, the first thing we have here is rental income. As I stated in the past, for any rental income you have, for any property that you have rental income, they have to be separated from your other businesses. So what I mean by that is any property that you get rental income and expenses for have to be reported on its own tax organizer. That's just a requirement in the IRS, and you need to report that separately. So if for example, if you have two rental properties, then we should be receiving two separate tax organizers. Each list each property income and expenses. For business income is any revenue that is generated by the corporation for its services or sale of products by the corporation. Personal income should not be listed here, or any loans that you made to the corporation. Other income is for income that doesn't fit under rental income or business income. An example of that would be interest income. So go ahead and just put anything other than rental or business income in this other income section. For your expenses, one of the things I want to point out is the rent expense. We've had several questions on this one. Your rent expense should not include your personal mortgage unless the corporation owns that home or has some interest in that home. There are several ways you can do this, so please reach out to the person that established the corporation for you for these different ways you can establish an ownership or an interest in your home. The IRS requires that in order for you to claim that on your tax return. Barring using your personal mortgage as a rental expense, any rent that the corporation uses or pays for should be reported here. An example of that would be a storage unit that the corporation rents out or rents for any items it would have in the storage unit. But please make sure not to include your personal mortgage in here. Another section we want to point out is the vehicle expenses. As we stated earlier, if you have vehicle expenses, Tab 2 must be completely filled out for each vehicle that the corporation is using. But the way this section is set up is that you have here on row 18, it's just a general category title. You don't have to worry about filling out anything here. You just need to concentrate on column 19 through 22. These would be for car insurance, vehicle gas, repairs, and other vehicle expenses. Please note that you should not be reporting any payments you make for your vehicle here, whether you purchased it or you leased it. In tab 2, as we went over earlier, there's a section for your purchase and your leased amounts, and we'll be reporting it that way. For your lease amounts, we'll report that entire amount that you leased for the year, and you'll be able to deduct that. If you purchased a vehicle, the IRS requires you to take a deduction over the next 5 years. So an example of that is if you purchased a vehicle for $50,000, the IRS will allow you to take $10,000 in deductions every year for the next 5 years. Again, that is only for a purchase vehicle. A lease amount, you will get the deduction for the entire lease amount of the year. But for purchases, the IRS requires that to be what's called amortized over the next 5 years. So please make sure not to report any of your payments that you make for your vehicles in this section. Row 23 will add up rows 19 to 22 to give a total vehicle expense. I also wanted to point out row 33, the legal and professional fees. If you're a new client, you probably had these legal and professional fees. So make sure that you have all this information available and report that here on this row. There's been several times in the past that some of our clients forget about this. When you had somebody create the corporation for you, that would qualify and that would go under this line 33, or this row 33. In row 37, we start our supply section. The supply section is made up of row 38 through 40. You have your normal supplies, you have your office supplies, and any other supplies. They all fall under the general tax category of supplies. So row 45 will total up rows 38 through 40 to give you a total supply amount. We also have other deductions. Other deductions would include furniture, equipment, education, uniforms, and this is supposed to say grooming, and security. Please make sure to report these fully, and if you did have other deductions that don't fit into these categories, please feel free to enter them in the spaces below or add spaces. But please keep in mind that this tax organizer was created from the actual tax return, and it uses these categories of income and expenses that are used in the tax return. So as much as possible, we want to try to fit any of our expenses in these categories to make sure we're in full compliance with the IRS. Now we'll go into tab number 4. For tab number 4, we've provided samples of the forms that are required on tab number 1. So for instance, your form 2553, if you're looking for that and you don't exactly know what it looks like, you can go ahead and go to tab number 4 and look for the form here, and it has the title of the form, how many pages the form has, and also a link to the IRS website or other websites that show a sample of this form. There's also some general comments here that will help you out to identify those forms. So please don't be shy in using this here to identify the documents that we are requesting in tab number 1. That's pretty much it for our tax organizer. I hope this has helped in preparing your 2020 tax return. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us and we'll help as soon as we can. Thank you for allowing us to file your tax returns and have a good day.